Hello, everybody. Today is Monday, March 12th, and we bring you episode 87 of Block Digest at block height 513,229. Introing Mr. Rick.
Hey, everybody. Hope y'all are having a good start of your week here on this Monday.
And GAW, chilling on the beach as usual.
Hey, guys. Thanks for giving us a couple extra days to get the show out.
And Janine, eating a pretzel without salt because she is a strange human being. I'm sorry, Janine.
It has salt, just like not huge, giant chunks on it, which are completely useless. Like they don't add anything to the flavor. So, yes, hi.
I'm sorry.
Hello. And yes, let's have some on a pretzel.
All right. So, the magnanimous title man, Mr. Jihan Warburg, saying some pretty weird stuff. Down in Washington D.C. here. It's blockchain-powered central banks, private central banks. I don't know why he felt the need to clarify that because most of the central banks in the world are already private. And Acnix made it. Welcome, Acnix. But this is this is a pretty weird turn for Bitmain and Jihan, I guess. They've been dominating the Bitcoin space for a long time. Tried their little switcheroo with Bcash, and now Bitmain is actually I don't know if the URL is in this article, but they actually have a new web page set up looking for applicants to develop private central bank startups using blockchain technology and issue private currencies. Real quick before I stop ranting, the one strange thing I took away from watching his presentation is just it's like he's just flailing for some solid ground to grab now that Bitmain is like actually facing competition and like consequences for the shit they've done. And his entire rationale was to have private central banks that could offer services to other jurisdictions if those other jurisdictions weren't really managing their money properly. And I just think that's really strange because, there are countries out in the world that already do that. Like unstable countries, they circulate and use US dollars. If another central bank is not really confident with their ability to manage stuff, they can peg their currency to the dollar. Like there are already these mechanisms somewhat of competition between different central banks in the world, which are already private entities. So I'm not really sure what he's trying to do here, except just throw out some word salad and pull a fast one here. But I mean, if anybody else has any other takeaway from that.
Well, Shinobi, Jihan is like the best defender of Bitcoin there is. And also, right. Aren't there don't you know a ton of startups who ended up becoming central banks? Like, don't you think that's going to be the hottest new thing is startups competing to become central banks?
Gosh, that's exactly what I think. It's the oddest combination of ideas I've ever heard of. It's like there's not even any bank startups, right? Like you don't do bank startups. You have to be capitalized so much in order to do a bank. The idea of like a central bank startup is, I mean, I guess if he's hanging out with Roger Ver and thinks that we're going to do like country startups, like we're going to just do a startup that's a whole new nation, maybe this doesn't sound as absurd to him, but oh my gosh.
See, I would normally agree with you, but like Jihan and Roger are pretty much on the outs from my understanding, and they're spewing like completely contradictory nonsense. I mean, like you have Jihan out there going Bitcoin Cash is its own separate thing, and Jihan going, no, Jedi mind trick. It is Bitcoin.
I don't know. I think that's a lot of good cop, bad cop stuff, possibly. But like even in this article, he argued that there's no one perfect cryptocurrency, right? There's going to be demand for lots of options in the market. So, be diversified, all that sort of stuff. that still is the best narrative that they have to pump Bcash. Or it's also the best narrative they have that's just anti-Bitcoin, right? Because people don't quite understand that money's special and that it's only really money if it's like a protocol, right? Where like the internet sort of has to be one internet. We can't have internets plural because that's stupid. A lot of people don't quite get that. So I feel like that's their central narrative, and they're definitely in agreement on that, pushing that concept.
Well, see, that's like part of what like it confuses me, because like there's no perfect cryptocurrency. Let's break that down. I'm going to assume there's two possible things he could mean: the monetary policy or the actual technological platform that it's hosted on. And in both of those cases, it's nonsensical. Like if you have Bitcoin, you can integrate things like side chains or other second layer solutions to add the functionalities that you cannot get into the blockchain itself. And in terms of monetary policy, well, you can do fractional reserve on second layers. And if people choose to use those or find value in those, then they'll do so. But in both of the cases, monetary policy or the actual technological capability of the platform, like the argument there is no perfect cryptocurrency is nonsense. Because if you actually look at how things work economically and how things work technologically, you can indirectly modify Bitcoin in either way if there is actual real value in doing so. And so like it's like there's really no rational basis for any of his statements during that presentation.
Yeah, it's kind of like saying there's no perfect internet protocol. That's true, but we're still going to standardize something that's good enough, because the whole point is it needs to be the same everywhere, or it doesn't really work very well. So I agree. It's a stupid concept as applied to cryptocurrencies, but it is the one that will probably sell more GPU miners and will allow Roger to pump Bcash the most.
Yeah, and like I'm just thinking about Bcashers in general. Like, while Veer and Jihan, like you're saying, they don't necessarily see eye to eye on Twitter, at least, and everything about Bitcoin Cash. I mean, like a lot of that Bitcoin Cash community still holds Jihan in a high regard. And I don't know, like you're saying, I mean, this speech and the relevance of it, not that important, other than like maybe, you're in DC. He's looking super snazzy in that picture, man. Like he's trying to play politician, like you're saying. I mean, he's kind of like, he's got competition coming in the space where Bitmain's not really going to be that more relevant for that much longer. So I think, maybe it is kind of just sort of putting out there something in this DC sphere to where you kind of just lay out some feelers and see if you can't, pick up some sort of lineup. I mean, like he's got some news coming up in Washington too, right? Where, I mean, it's like, so he's in DC, he's doing some stuff there, and he's just trying to, I guess, spread his influence as far as he can. But it is interesting coming from this angle where he's coming from China too, with the whole private central bank issue and like, and what he's saying there. And we know that the People's Bank of China has talked about doing their own crypto thing. So yeah, it's I don't know. I see him as being like trying to be a powerhouse from China as much as he can, where he'd be the next Chinese president or something. It's maybe a political play.
Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of silly from like multiple angles. I mean, like one, like, China is pretty much doing everything they can to push Bitcoin out of the country without outright making it illegal to hold it. And I mean, the PBOC with their crypto projects, air quotes, like they're being very slow and very cautious. And like they understand the change in dynamic that would create as far as like banks now and their reserve levels, how that would affect interest rates and loans and so on and so forth. And they're not really trying to jump the gun and just start playing fast and loose. So like one, he's kind of like spitting upon the notion in China that things should be controlled centrally by the state in even talking in this manner. And two, like he's kind of like getting backed into a corner like domestically in China. So it's like, what's going on here? Is this like him just taking big risks, spewing nonsense his government would not approve of, or is China thinking more like, let's go experiment in somebody else's backyard, and if shit breaks, it's not us, and then we'll try to sift through what works. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like, that's kind of, I don't know, it just feels like that's sort of something that could happen. I mean, China, like we're saying, they're being really precautious about what they're doing there with this crypto and Bitcoin in general. And, we're pretty fast and loose with, allowing that innovation to occur. And I guess, they want to be very conservative about before they implement something to make sure that it works, where it's like, yeah, you could come over here, you could set up some sort of small deal with a local government and sort of test these things out before you actually implement it on such a broad level over there, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And then I also think it's like, looking at this as like a means of social attack. I mean, as like one of the biggest ASIC producers in the Bitcoin ecosystem, he's like been branching out his ASIC business, like attempting to branch out through things like Bcash. And it's like, this kind of is in perfect sync with the way he's been attacking things like that. Like, Bitcoin isn't good enough. Like, we need lots of these things. We need so many things that Bitcoin just blurs into being one of all the things out there, because it's not good enough. You can't build things on top of it, or you can't alter the supply on second layers if that's actually a problem or something people see value in. Like, it's like I really feel like he is just kind of multi-pronged, trying to like undermine and dilute like Bitcoin as a network effect as much as possible. And it's like, something like this, it really makes me wonder, what is the relationship between Jihan and the Chinese government? Because like I have always been open to the possibility there is some kind of relationship there. And like, anybody who watches the show regularly has heard me rant about their like ASICs for deep learning and how I see that lining up as a contractor for the Chinese government. But like, how far does that go beyond just business? Because like, this really, if anything actually comes of this, like, this is going to be a very weird expansion and dilution of things in the cryptocurrency space, and kind of try to steer the narrative back towards, we don't need these permissionless public systems that can't be shut down or are beyond people's control. Like, we just central banks that can just let people in other countries use stuff. And I mean, like, I'm sure most people have expected that to come eventually, but it just the way he presented this in this panel in DC, it was just strange. Like, it was almost like just hollow talking points without any real kind of a rationalization behind it.
Yeah, I've always sort of had some kind of like, I mean, you got, I don't know, level of suspicion about Jihan and the Chinese government. I mean, it just seems like they would, have an interest in, talking to him and making sure that they're working with him, and like they both sort of see eye to eye on things, considering like, his large stake in Bitcoin. So I don't know. I mean, like, it's definitely something where, we're not seeing everything. I mean, it's like Jihan Wu, come on, that covert ASIC boost, and, it's the mining thing, all the underground game theory stuff. I can imagine there's, some discussions going on and everything. Like, we're not going to see his direct motive just from that little speech. And like you're saying, it doesn't really have much relevance for what Bitcoin is trying to do. So, like, hopefully we will see, like, competitive economies and stuff, but it won't be like in this, like, in this sort of framework. It'll be in like side chains, tied to Bitcoin type deal, where everything's sort of settle into Bitcoin. So I don't know. It's yeah, it's questionable. It's always kind of questionable stuff with Jihan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm surprised you're so quiet right now, JW. But like, and it's another aspect is like
what were you expecting me to say?
I don't know. Jihan's an idiot.
Chinese government bad, man.
No, honestly, man, I think a lot of the fear around him having a relationship with the Chinese government is more than it would be if he was German. or if he was Italian or something. And I think that's partly because we've just been washed in propaganda so aggressively over the last 15 years about like shipping containers being delivered in ports full of Chinese tanks that are, going to initiate the war, and the economy in China growing so fast that they're going to dominate us. So I don't know. I think there's probably some kind of relationship there, but I doubt that. I don't know. I doubt it's very serious. Like we're pretty early on, and I think China knows that Bitcoin will just flee to other jurisdictions if they lock it down too much. So I tend to still kind of feel like this is mostly just con men trying to play dirty and not full on nation states. I've been shocked at how little it seems like nation states have really gotten involved at all. So I don't know.
And I mean, like another aspect to kind of just back away from Jihan himself is like the argument he makes is kind of ridiculous in my point of view. I mean, like money is like it all comes down to the network effect, and like that's the biggest like challenge for Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency is growing and maintaining that network effect, because without that there's no value. And so like where is his rationale to have a private company print money out of thin air, try to export it to different jurisdictions globally, and compete in an environment with lots of shit doing this, like coming away with any kind of stable network effect or actual utility? I mean, like Bitcoin itself that's something we are still struggling with and will for a long time to come, I think. So how does injecting a million different things competing in that way, like how does that lead to stability or a better utility when like it's just going to be things clawing at each other for network effect? And I mean, like it's just a completely irrational proposal on its face. Like from where I'm standing, like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think it's really obvious that the killer app here is money, and money means it's the thing that's easiest to sell wherever you're at, and it's the thing that people keep track of how much money they've spent, or I should say how much wealth they've spent and how much wealth they've earned, and that requires that it be one thing. And I really don't see it being regional with the internet. I think regional money is just sort of a weird moment in history, because we've had gold in the past for global money. I think we'll have global money again. Because when I buy stuff, I'm buying stuff from China or Germany or New Jersey, right? I don't want to have to think about conversion rates and all that bull crap. So it just makes sense to me that it would be a global money, and that's the whole mission of Bitcoin. So people that don't seem to quite understand that, gosh, it would be great if you guys could just understand that, because I feel like so many of the conversations that I have and so many of the conflicts are related to just not quite getting what the game is here, right? We're not just trying to create a bunch of random digital assets. We're trying to create money, and money has certain attributes, and one of those is that it's like the thing that everybody uses to buy and sell. It's not the things plural, because that's called barter, right? We're not trying to create barter. We're not trying to go back in time where like two cavemen are trading, carrots for furs. We're trying to continue with money because it's really, really useful and solves a lot of problems. We're just trying to get a money that's harder to steal and is a lot more easy to transport. So that's like this tip of the spear. Everything else is going to be in the wake, and the only exception to that is scams. So if you're Jihan, I think it makes a lot of sense, or if you're Roger Ver, it makes a lot of sense to try to confuse and obfuscate that reality, but that is the reality.
Yeah, I think that's probably why he said something like that. I mean, it's just, like you're saying, just try and confuse people.
Yeah, and like, to slide along to the next thing, not sure this is entirely breaking news. Their expansion into like the Northwest has been talked about before, but Bitmain actually, or rather Jihan, incorporated a new company, Ant Creek LLC, which he's the sole owner of. Sorry, one second. But yeah, and like that is like, why is he talking this huge game about expanding like private bank startups and at the same time, he's like trying to move his mining operations out of a hostile jurisdiction into a non-hostile one and keep them functioning. I mean, like if Bitmain is trying to branch out and encourage all of these private currency startups, like, you know, it's like completely at odds with his investment in Bitcoin. So it's just like doubly like, what the hell is going through this guy's head?
Wait, so he's expanding into the Pacific Northwest of the United States?
Yeah, he's got the paperwork in order.
Oh, well then I have a GIF, which I just posted in the internal chat because I just saw it. Uh-oh, Shinobi has to quarantine his cat.
I don't think you have a GIF. You might have a GIF, but I don't think
I have both of I have a gift. How about that?
Awesome.
I have a gift.
I like gifts.
So yeah, the story is that there's some paperwork that's been filed that he's in the process of buying like 40 acres in Washington State. There's a lot of hydroelectric cheap power in Washington State, so that's probably the draw there. The thing that seemed questionable to me, though, is that it's his own name on the articles of incorporation, and that makes me think that he's not actually doing it, that it's just maybe I don't know, a PR move or something, because, you know, if he's got a lot of money, it's uncommon for people to start businesses like directly in their own name and just, you know, be the guy. Normally there'd be a little bit more of a paper trail to follow, where they would have a registered agent, right? There would be a little bit more privacy involved, especially if you're trying to buy a piece of land. You know, you don't normally want to announce everything about it, right, to competitors and things like that. Now you may be attracting other people into that town to try to work out cheap deals on hydroelectric. So there's a lot of reasons that seems odd to me, but yeah, if he actually is, I think it's positive. And I think it makes sense, right? I mean, we sort of have this perception in the West that everything is cheap in China all the time, and that's not true. There's more like nuts and bolts manufacturing going on in the continental US than there ever has been before in history. We do buy a lot of stuff from China, but we also make a lot of stuff, and a lot of, like, you know, car fenders and just things that you wouldn't expect to be produced here. We're producing more than ever before. So yeah, I think mining is going to be the same way. It's got to follow the cheapest electricity. And even though there's weird stuff that goes on in places like Venezuela, where, you know, you can basically buy electricity for free or maybe work out a dirty deal in China, that stuff doesn't last forever. And eventually places with cheap electricity are going to have a lot of miners.
Yeah, I'd imagine just also, like, you know, we're seeing a lot of that whole miner expansion into Quebec, and like we're seeing the Dragon Mint miner come out and GMO and all these other sort of things. So it's just like, maybe just like you're saying, like it is a place where you could get, you know, energy prices relatively cheap, you know, based on their renewables. So, I mean, like, go ahead and plant your flag in the ground, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And now that my cat is safely quarantined, we will show you this GIF where you can enjoy Oregon as an anime.
What am I watching right now? This just looks like a cartoon.
It's go to Oregon. Look at Oregon. It's like an anime. You can live in an anime in Oregon.
Oregon, right?
All right, I'm too old. I don't know.
It's Oregon. It's Oregon. Damn it! It's Oregon and GIF. I say GIF. I changed to GIF just because of that. So yeah.
It's a travel ad. This Oregon travel ad is basically a Pacific Northwest anime produced by Studio Blah. See, if I would have read, I would know it's
Ghibli. Ghibli. It's the same studio that makes like all of the really popular anime movies, like Princess Mononoke. And what's the other one? There's several. My favorite one, I think, is Mononoke, but there's also Nausicaa Valley of the Wind. But basically a bunch of really amazing anime movies that are worth watching just for the art, because it's really amazing and creative.
Yeah,
I think if you're thinking about Oregon, you need to check out Portlandia. That'll
or just the weather in general. That's right. It's like it's so beautiful. I've like thought about it a couple of times, but then I just think about that weather. I'm like, oh goodness, I don't know.
So yeah, I just thought. I mean, Studio Ghibli is a Japanese company, but I thought, since we're talking about Pacific Northwest, I might as well share that because
it's close enough. Washington and Oregon are close enough.
I would prefer, the Oregon Trail to Jihan Wu setting up some kind of mining operation there.
And I mean, I'll probably tweet this out on the Digest Twitter later. I didn't really want to put it on the news desk because it's one of those gonzo I'm in a story articles that I hate so much. But I mean, there's an article, it's not really too bad, kind of just going over how this one town in Washington has kind of developed since around 2013 as like a huge like mining hub. And it's not really like a news or anything, but I think it was for being a gonzo thing that I hate so much, like a nice view into like how that area has been developing as somewhere with incredibly cheap electricity as far as like attracting all these miners for different currencies.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, like before I was thinking about moving up to Colorado, that was definitely in my thought process, and yeah, it wasn't an easy decision to make, honestly. But yeah, it's kind of I don't know. It seemed like there's always sort of been a strong pull to go up there and start mining since I've been in, at least in like 2015.
I mean, like JW said, anywhere with cheap electricity is gonna eventually wind up being a mining magnet. I mean, it's like it really is just kind of like letting a bunch of balls go on an uneven map. Like they're going to seek the lowest point, and that's where they're going to wind up stopping.
Yeah, lots of renewable energy out there.
But trademark jarring Shinobi segue. I've been seeing a lot of tweets and stuff going around about how the CFTC is going to regulate our asses and screw everything up. And I kind of wanted to, even though this is a little bit old, this is kind of a summary of the keynote address that the CFTC Commissioner gave at the DC Blockchain Summit that Jihan spoke at. And let me just say, it's not the FUD of the CFTC is going to regulate our wow, my mouth just didn't listen there. They're not going to regulate everything into the apocalypse. This was actually a pretty neutral speech where the CFTC kind of went over how they even got any regulatory authority over Bitcoin in the space. And it came from the Commodities Exchange Act in Congress, which grants them pretty much exclusive jurisdiction over all futures, options, or swap contracts on commodities. And kind of the one thing I want to point out with this is that is all they really have exclusive jurisdiction over. So for looking at like the case of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, they really don't have any authority over spot markets. Like they pretty much only have regulatory or jurisdictional authority over futures contracts or swaps or anything that is not actual spot trading of the asset themselves. And for those who remember back in 2015 or 16, I forget, when they fined Bitfinex for their futures contracts being available to US customers, that was pretty much the only reason they were able to step in and fine Bitfinex is because Americans were able to trade very small leverage contracts for Bitcoin. And if that hadn't been the case, like they would have had no authority to do anything with Bitfinex. And that's actually kind of why they went through the process of, setting things up with BitGo and segregated wallets, which ended up leading to the infamous hack. But I kind of wanted to show like two things with that is like one, regulators kind of sticking their nose in shit was an indirect cause of one of the bigger hacks in this ecosystem's history. And two, the only reason they had that authority in the first place was futures. Like they have no authority over spot markets, over something like Coinbase or Bitstamp, where you are literally just buying and selling a Bitcoin with no leverage, with no loans or collateral. And one of the things the commissioner, Brian Quintes, went on to say is he was actually pointing at a, okay, I need to really take notes on where things are and stuff I read. He was pointing out the Crypto UK, which is actually kind of a self-regulatory body being set up in the United Kingdom, and actually specifically mentioned as well the Japanese self-regulatory body that we covered a week or so ago being set up in Japan. And he's like pretty much encouraging American companies in the Bitcoin and crypto space to establish their own self-regulatory organization. And he's pretty much asking for these types of bodies to be created and give guidance on how the federal government should handle regulating things. So pretty much the commissioner of the CFTC is literally like asking us to regulate ourselves as a model for how they should establish any federal regulation in the long term. And so like this is really a far cry from the FUD I've been seeing on like Reddit and Twitter, where the CFTC is going to come down with a hammer. Like they're actually pretty much asking us to handle our own shit and tell them what they should do.
Yeah, if you scroll up a bit in that article, I thought it was funny because it stood out to me while you were talking that he described, it was like towards the top. Keep going. There was a paragraph where he like described the CFTC. Keep going. It's like really near the top. It's like the second or third paragraph. Yeah. Fourth paragraph says the CFTC is the traditional regulator of frozen concentrated orange juice and pork belly futures.
Oh my goodness.
That's such a weird description.
Well, I mean, it's like, I really think like, you know, everybody should go check this link out in the show notes and actually read the whole thing. I kind of just wanted to condense the main points connected to cryptocurrency, but it really is kind of interesting when you look at the history of how a lot of financial regulatory bodies in the US came to be. Like a lot of them actually started as markets regulating themselves and then becoming kind of more formalized regulatory bodies. And it really is just kind of interesting to see, because like it's not like some anomaly that this is being asked of the cryptocurrency space. This is kind of the norm for how a lot of these bodies developed in traditional markets, like even before electricity existed.
Yeah, was it on one of, I don't know, I don't remember who said it or where I heard it. Might have been on the show, but I think at one point recently I heard someone say that most of the regulatory agencies in the US, they all started off as like private companies, and then the government was like, ooh, we should probably take this over. And so they like absorbed it into the federal or state governments as a regulatory agency. But most of these started out as private companies that were doing this. So the government is actually not very good at regulating. It's basically just absorbing what private enterprise has already started and applying more force and violence to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, yeah, it's how things have trended, but I mean, I still think this is a very positive thing. I mean, as opposed to dropping the hammer down with insane nonsense and no context for how any of this works or like actually evolved in this space, like they're kind of going like, hey, people who actually have skin in the game, who actually know what's going on, like put your 2 cents on the table before we start just making decisions and passing laws.
Yeah, I kind of, I don't know. It was an interesting read. I didn't read all of it. I skipped some paragraphs, but the general tone seemed to be positive. It's a little creepy to me anytime I hear somebody talking about regulation, but he does do a good job of sounding rational, which is kind of encouraging. I don't really like the idea that that they're going to set up a regulatory body that's specifically dedicated to Bitcoin. I wish they would just say, hey, you know what? There's plenty of rules on the books already about how we deal with commodities. We've decided it's a commodity, which seems to make sense to me. It's at least rational, and then just do their freaking job. And then we would have this guy that said all this positive stuff. Now it's like, all right, great. What kind of political organization is going to be set up to regulate it, and who's going to be the most influential in that, new little thing? So that's a little creepy to me, but overall, I think it's better than I would have expected.
Yeah, I mean, like I was, thinking that is a good thing just to see, talking about, us stepping up and self-regulating, like you're saying. I mean, that's kind of what you've been doing with the threat model and with your coin comparison chart is like, not necessarily what we regulate, but educate. It's like that education part to, where people understand what they're getting into, and like that. I think that's basically what he's talking about. It's just like us, sort of policing each other, and I don't know, I don't want to get hung up in like regulation and education. I mean, like, I don't think he expects us to shut down coins and stuff like that. I mean, it's just like all we could really do is just do what we do. I mean, like, it's part of like what the Block Digest is like we just, educate as many people as we can about what's going on, because there is no real regulation. So it is kind of like a, we're not regulating, but we're trying our best to make sure that there's at least something in the space where people can go to and say like, okay, well, this information seems valid at this point. Like, and maybe I should go with that, because it's just like no guidance. And, whenever they do create these regulatory bodies, it usually does hinder the innovation aspect of it. So I'm sure it's going to be for the best the way it goes like that, as far as self-regulatory.
Yeah, the bright side of that is that if they're setting up a new regulatory body, or they're saying that's what needs to be done, maybe they'll do it their government way, and it'll take 18 or 24 months before they even pick the next head. And that'll give us another 24 months to just outrun them before they start making up stupid rules. So yeah, I mean, all in all, I think entrepreneurs should be really encouraged about the space. The news seems to be more and more positive. I can't believe that there's like laws saying utility tokens are okay, and they're so generous about how they define it as just that you have to have the application released before you release the utility token. There has to be something like functional and working. That seems way more generous than I would have thought. So I'm hoping more and more.
Not generous enough for some.
What do you mean?
I mean, there's a few utility tokens that we've kind of talked about on Block Digest that did not fulfill that one requirement that we were already aware of like years ago, that's what you would have to do to even have a chance at not being a security.
Yeah, totally. Now, yeah, the BAT guys are screwed. What's the name of the browser? Brave browser. Browser's cool, but if you helped pump BAT, you're probably. Do we know the 60 companies that got hit by the SEC yet? I would love to know if BAT was one of them.
I have not really dug that deep into it. I mean, I would call this a boring lull as far as news is going, but there's still a lot going on.
I don't think they released the names of them yet.
Yeah, I don't think they have either, but that's going to be fun. I mean, I don't like bad guys doing stuff, but if they beat up other bad guys, they get to watch.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, G. Willikers has just said this in the troll box, that I think he makes a perfect point. Like, decentralized exchanges are coming, and I think that just honestly, like, I think that is just yet another positive aspect of this kind of encouraging self-regulation, because once decentralized exchanges really start picking up and taking in roots, they, like any non-decentralized exchange, now has to compete with that. And so I think you'll see a lot of incentives for regulations to be as minimal as possible or as reasonable as possible, because if they just start dropping in all of these requirements that are overbearing, everybody's just going to move into decentralized exchanges. Like, they'll have to actually compete with that in terms of regulation. Otherwise, they're going to have a lot more overhead to deal with.
Yep, totally. Hey, if there is anybody out there that has not used a decentralized exchange, if you will go through the process of signing up with Bisq and doing your first purchase, then I would love to talk to you and just get your thoughts on it. Maybe, have you as a guest on the first few minutes of Block Digest or whatever, just to talk about it. I've heard from a couple people that it's tricky, that there's some work involved. For me, it wasn't too bad, but yeah, I think it would be worth talking about. I think there's a surprising number of people that think decentralized exchanges are only for like crypto to crypto. They're not. They're for fiat to crypto. It's how you should buy crypto, because you don't want to have all your information in a big database that's going to get leaked. But yeah, if you do that, I think it would make for an interesting conversation. So do it and then hit me up on Twitter.
Also, as a closing thought on the CFTC thing, I think most of the fact that they're kind of moving a bit slowly and maybe not being as harsh as we might have expected them to be is because, first of all, it's like anything to do with computers. It's like, oh shit, internet stuff. How do we deal with this? And it's like, oh, special internet stuff. This is going to be really hard. Like anything to do with the internet, they're like, oh, if it's not like a centralized database where they can just tell the FBI, hey, go shut down this website. They're like, oh shit, what do we do now?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
All right. So who is ready for our favorite pastime on the show, shitting on incompetent idiots?
Oh, man.
Who is
That
it?
was our show. Do we do anything else?
Who is it?
Do we
this
ever
time?
talk about anything else?
It's Armin von Bitcoin on Twitter, grabbing a screenshot from Bitpay. Bitcoin network cost 1.9%. Bitcoin Cash network cost 0%. That's really funny because I didn't think fees were calculated based on the percentage of money that you were sending. It had to do with the data size of your transaction. I'm really curious how this works like that.
Well, I just think, like this should not, I wouldn't even take this necessarily as a criticism of Bitcoin. It's like 1% of a transaction. That's like, what is it? 1.9% of the transaction amount, or like they don't really clarify what it is, but it's just kind of funny because it's like the idea that you would have no network fees is a really problematic thing that people should not be promoting as like a good feature. Okay. If you have fees, that means there's competition. That means there's people using it, that there's actually competition to get into the block space. And there's a lot of transactions going through. Whereas if you have no fees, that means no one's competing. Like literally Bitcoin Cash is so desperate for transactions right now because they're getting beat by Dogecoin and Bclassic. Like, having a 0% network cost is not a good sign. I don't know why people think it is.
Mm-hmm. But also, it's like fees are not dictated by the percentage of your value. Like 1.9%. Okay, that's bullshit. Does that mean that my fee is going to be $1 if I spend $100, $10 if I spend $1,000? Like that's not how this works. Your transaction takes up a certain number of bytes, or if you're condensing a lot of outputs, kilobytes, and that is what the fee is based on. So this is literally, in my mind, fraudulent. Like they are just completely misrepresenting the entire dynamic, like of how fees actually work on Bitcoin. And they're starting to push shit so far that businesses are getting fed up with it now. Henry Braid's Denarian Bitcoin is no longer going to be using BitPay as soon as they switch over to an alternative. Ibrea Network, a real estate association for blockchain, is going to be switching to Coinbase. Actually, it's not much of an improvement, but at least Coinbase seems to be slowly pulling its head out of its ass lately. And I mean, like, this isn't even the best part yet. Yeah. So, remember how BitPay said that they upgraded to SegWit? They didn't. They lied. They outright lied. They upgraded to accept coins from a SegWit address, which if you actually understand how all this works at a low level is complete nonsense. There is no change that should be needed unless you have a completely incompetently put together backend for me to send from a SegWit address to a normal address, which is what they're still using right now. That would save them about 60% on the consolidation fees, which is part of their fee pricing. They pass the cost of consolidating onto their customers. So yeah, they are completely full of shit. Like they outright lied. Like their statement they upgraded to SegWit is objectively false. It is completely nonsense if they try to twist that into we upgraded to allow accepting from SegWit, because they don't have to change anything. My wallet scans their QR code, sees that their address is non-SegWit, and it sends them coins. They don't have to change anything. Like, and then the last cherry on the top, thank you, Udi, for fucking doing all this digging and research. But apparently during the spam nonsense during December when we were rallying, BitPay's network cost was consistently exactly $10 per UTXO. Here's Udi quoting them, responding to the initial nonsense here, that their fee is directly based on Bitcoin D miner fee estimates, which only work in Bitcoin, have no idea what the fiat value of Bitcoin is at any time. So how is that true when it was exactly $10 per UTXO at the time? I mean, like they're literally just completely full of shit. Everything that has come out of their mouth regarding SegWit and regarding getting called out for their fee prices here, they are 100% full of shit. They are lying.
Yeah, definitely. And it's nice to see that they keep saying stuff that that people are already all over the top of, right? Like, it's really hard to lie to this community about stuff that you can just go verify on the blockchain, or you can just do a shout out and get a lot of people that have used BitPay to give you their transaction IDs so you can go look them up and see what kind of fees were being paid. I actually, about 2 weeks ago, I was trying to register a domain name, and I tried to use Namecheap. And when I went through the checkout process, it was just broken. Like, you just could not buy with Bitcoin. I even installed Copay because I know that's their stupid wallet, sent some money over to the Copay wallet, and then tried to pay. Still wouldn't work. So the checkout flow for Namecheap, if you're buying with Bitcoin, was definitely broken. So I ended up not using them, using another registrar. And in the process, I said, I tweeted out to him, hey, this is broken. If you guys are looking at something, if you want to switch, let me know. I'll help you out. So I've been going back and forth with those guys, trying to set up a time to help understand how much volume they're doing, and how much trouble they want to put into it or whatever, to look at different options. And then this week it came out that BitPay is just playing all these games to push Bcash. And the thing that was the best was that I don't know if it was Roger, somebody tweeted out, hey, look at how great Bitcoin Cash is. All these new businesses, including Namecheap, are going to start accepting it. And I was able to immediately reply and say, actually, BitPay sucks so bad, I'm talking with Namecheap right now about how to switch away from it. So I love the way that the timing worked out on that. But yeah, those guys are fraudsters. I mean, they're definitely pumping the Bcash scam. There's no question about it. The 1.9% fee versus no fee is definitely a fraudulent statement designed to deceive people. The fact that the Bitcoin checkout flow was broken, I don't think that was just me. I do think that they intentionally broke it, or at least when it broke, they didn't make it a priority. And all the announcements and everything that they're doing is clearly not neutral, right? They're definitely pushing Bitcoin Cash. They announced that they're going to switch. BitPay was saying that they're going to switch to Bitcoin Cash, I think in the last week also. So like, they couldn't be any more aggressive about this fraud. I don't think they'll actually get in trouble for it because our legal system sucks so bad, but there's no doubt from an ethical standpoint, this is fraud.
Yeah, looking at this just reminded me of that whole Bitcoin.com fiasco we went through, where it was sort of defaulting of Bitcoin Cash, and just like it's just another wallet that's really trying to, try and get people to use Bitcoin Cash. And like you're saying, it's pretty ridiculous to say like this is a good thing. There's no network cost here, but like it shows it's not really being used. And yeah, I mean, like the whole thing is definitely deceiving, and just sort of like puts on this perception of like, well, this is going to cost me money, this isn't going to cost me money, so I'll send it through this, and maybe they could pick up a little extra traffic that way. And it's like they did that with Bitcoin.com wallet, and now with this BitPay. It's just it's the same actors with the just like a different software.
I mean, like at this point, like if I see the BitPay logo on anything, you just lost a customer. I mean, like the only voting in my mind that has any merit in the world is with your money. So, yeah, anybody using BitPay, I am not buying a single thing from them until they stop using BitPay. And I would encourage anybody out there who thinks similarly to me about all of this shit to act in the same way.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's a self-enforced boycott, right? I mean, I don't know if it's completely broken, but there's some major use case. There's like major parts of the checkout flow that I personally tested and are broken if you're trying to buy with Bitcoin. So I think BitPay is just screwing over their own customers in multiple ways. And, we've seen a string of people say that they're trying to switch over and get rid of them. So I don't think you even have the option, as far as I can tell, to buy anything with Bitcoin through BitPay. But maybe there's other flows, or, maybe it was iPhone and Android works or something. I don't know. But from my experience, you're going to have a hard time anyway, even if you wanted to.
And I mean, like, this is ridiculous. I mean, like they've jumped to BIP 70. So now you are forced to use a specific wallet to spend anything with them. They're outright lying about how they arrive at their fee calculations. They are fraudulently misrepresenting the situation, and they are intentionally damaging the usability of one thing that they accept to try and push another that nobody seems interested in using. I mean, it really seems like Steven Spare is intent on driving this company into the ground. And it really, like, it infuriates the shit out of me, because before they accepted funding from Bitmain last year, he released a series of articles on scaling Bitcoin, on upgrading Bitcoin. And it was one of the most coherent, articulate understandings of the protocol I have seen from a CEO in the space. And then they got an investment from Bitmain, and snap, that entire attitude disappeared. Every bit of understanding he displayed in writing those things seemed to vanish out the window. And he is just spewing nonsense and bullshit since then. I mean, it really is just, it's so transparent what happened there. He took money and then just started being incredibly intellectually dishonest.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys are going to do that. Their business models are stupid, right? Like BitPay from day one was a bad idea with bad timing, because we're just not at that phase of Bitcoin adoption, right? Like pets.com was a stupid idea. Amazon.com, selling pet food, I imagine they probably do 10, 15 years later, but that was not the right time to try to do that. And trying to, really focus on retail for Bitcoin 5 years ago, or whenever they really took a bunch of money and started going aggressive after it, terrible timing. So these guys are desperate, and they're realizing that their whole business model is just, stupid. And they're going to sell out and, cause some problems as we watch them just, shake to death in their death rattle before it's all over and we don't have to talk about stupid BitPay anymore.
Jesus, just wonder how much longer can it last, man? It's like, I mean, whatever. I guess the Bcash split did just happen last year and everything, but it is kind of like, I wonder how many of these games are they going to be able to play and for how long. Hopefully,
they were so funded, man. I mean, if the ASIC boost thing is legit, there was so much money flowing into those coffers, and they didn't know what to do with it because they, what would you do with it, right? So they're trying to grab some portions of the network or grab their own network that they can control and have power over into the future. And it's not working, right? And that's why Bitcoin was designed the way it was. It's unfortunate we had ASIC boost. I mean, really, if ASIC boost was anything close to what people think that it was, it's amazing we survived it. So I think we're doing pretty good. But yeah, that was a lot of cash going into malicious hands.
Mm-hmm. And I just got permission. So an interesting anecdote from Mr. Hodl. I think it was 2 years ago, Hodl, right, at the Consensus Conference in New York. He actually was in an elevator with Gillespie and Spare. And he pretty much point blank asked them in the fervor, or no, it was a year ago, in the fervor of the 2x nonsense, if they were intentionally trying to make blocks so big that people couldn't run nodes privately behind things like Tor. And they just immediately went deadly silent and rushed out of the elevator the first chance they got without giving any response. So, I mean, like, these people are not people I trust. I do not trust their intentions. I do not trust their character. I do not trust anything about them. Like, they are here for nefarious reasons. They are not here to actually push a decentralized, verifiable currency. They are just trying to run some Silicon Valley scammy nonsense and piggyback on the Bitcoin brand in the process.
You're right. And I mean, like, JW saying, it's like they do have like a pretty big war coffer there. And I'm like kind of wondering how long ago. Do you think maybe it'll be like, the first real, like, Lightning Network being used for real transactions, like, through a retailer, to where like that'll be the death blow, to where it's like, okay, doesn't really matter what you're spending now. It's like, this is evident. You think?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, the whole idea of BitPay to do retail directly on the blockchain, right? That was stupid. Like, it was never going to be possible to support one McDonald's. Like, you couldn't support you didn't have to be a genius to run this math either, right? You could just figure out how many transactions happen at one McDonald's down the street per day. Can we support all of those on the Bitcoin blockchain? Maybe one McDonald's, maybe 5, but you're certainly not going to support the franchise, right? And so as soon as you do that math and you realize that it just doesn't make sense, you go, okay, well, we got to wait, right? For example, we were just talking about my idea that I've been working on this idea for a few years now to teach like math and programming to kids. And it wasn't good enough, right? And now I feel like, well, if I can add Bitcoin into it to incentivize kids or students, let's say, learning, solving the math problem, then maybe that'll get me over the hump and I can actually make this project work. But I didn't immediately go, okay, let me roll it out, right? I'm like, okay, well, let me think about this, because I know I need to have really low transaction fees. I guess I got to wait for Lightning Network, like there's a thought process that goes into that. You don't just go, oh, well, Bitcoin exists, therefore it can support my use case, right? This is just, that's stupid. Like, if I can get somebody to give me money, if I can raise funds, right? If I can do this scammy thing and make the rounds in Silicon Valley and somebody will write me a check, that's all that I care about. I don't really care whether the technology is going to work or be there. I feel like those guys just go in that sort of jackass startup bucket. And yeah, I don't see them pivoting and being able to adopt Lightning. Like, I think everything is just moved on, right? Like, so yeah, I think they're eventually dead, but I don't know. We'll see. Maybe they'll pivot. Maybe they'll start doing the right thing. Coinbase is doing a little bit more than that than I would have expected. But yeah, I think all these business models are stupid, right? Like, Coinbase's business model is stupid. BitPay's model is stupid. And I think that level of desperation that happens when you realize that you're a failure is really the reason that a lot of these guys are willing to do some just stupid, unscrupulous stuff.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, the fucking ridiculous part about it is they could have made it work. Here, open an account with BitPay. You can deposit a balance here. And if you want to spend something to a merchant, we'll handle that off chain in our service. Like, they could have made it work in a way. And instead, they decided to continue going full retard. They continued expecting to just be able to externalize all of their costs onto the Bitcoin network without needing to increase their efficiency in how they use it. They just thought, hey, this is free. We can just run a business for free. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's one of those things where hopefully, it's like, I don't know. It's like we're saying, when's it going to end? It's like, hopefully, whenever the Lightning Network does start like showing to be, the place to go for these retail transactions, and it'll kind of just be the death blow of it. And I could still see them trying to fight it at that point, being like, well, yeah, there's Lightning Network on this, but we got that. And I don't know, but hopefully at that point, the market will see like what is more efficient and be able to distinguish between that. Hopefully, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And this next one, trademark Shinobi segue. This is kind of freaking ridiculous. For those of you who don't know Eric Wall, he's a journalist who's been writing as a columnist on Bitcoin.com for a while. And, honestly, he's pretty impartial in the way he covers things. Like, he does not just get tribal with the content he produces. And he's been fired from Bitcoin.com. In his words, due to a misalignment of opinion on certain matters between me and the overall team. And what's this? Oh, he just tweeted BCH, you mean Bcash? There, I said it a few days ago. Huh. Interesting. He says the word Bcash, and then he gets fired. I mean, like, I really used to look at this guy and just Bitcoin.com as a news source in general. Like, despite Roger's nonsense and insanity, like, there is actually a decent amount of impartial, like, objective news published on that site, with Eric being one of the people who actually produces it. And like, I feel like my opinion on that has completely changed, seeing all it takes is saying the word Bcash and you're fired.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that surprised. I'm surprised that someone who wasn't really in favor of Bitcoin Cash wasn't fired earlier. But one of the articles that really annoyed me from Bitcoin.com is the one about the North American Bitcoin Conference, aka Miami Bitcoin Conference, because that conference has come up in pretty much every conversation as an example of how Bitcoin has failed. Like, oh, if a Bitcoin conference doesn't even accept Bitcoin, then what the hell? This thing doesn't work anymore. And like, no one bothered to actually go to the website and see, hey, they were accepting Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies for weeks. They stopped all cryptocurrencies. I think it was 14 days before the conference started. It wasn't because of Bitcoin. It was just because they have a shitty ticket processing system that they had to stop it 2 weeks before. Or maybe they just planned that on purpose. They wanted to have all the finances wrapped up before the event started. And that was one of the things that was brought up in the John Oliver piece that people have been sharing today, was about how the North American Bitcoin Conference didn't take Bitcoin. It's like, no, fake news, which is one of the things that was pushed out by Bitcoin.com. So I don't know if you guys if anyone in the audience hasn't seen it yet, there's a really funny ending. The John Oliver piece was generally positive about Bitcoin, despite having some fake news elements, like I said, like the conference. But the end of it, Shinobi, if you skip to 23 minutes in, I was so scared. Like Alyssa, I was really scared because I thought he had actually invited the BitConnect guy onto the show, and I was like, oh my god, no. And it turns out it's Keegan Michael Key.
No, I liked the video the minute I heard the voice, and I was like, oh, we got the Carlos guy. And then I saw his Keegan Michael Key. I was like, oh, he didn't get Carlos. They
didn't get Carlos, but they had someone else play him.
I could see Carlos in his apartment being like, why didn't they call me?
Yeah, and so
to remember here is that this is a brand new, very complicated space, and literally nobody knows how it's going to develop. So you need to be careful. And I know that sounds boring. Caution is a tough sell when you're up against BitConnect and HODL Gang, which is why I have invited a special guest to help make that message a little more exciting.
Hey, hey, hey.
Right.
It's so good.
Right. When I heard that, I was like, oh no, they got Carlos. It's awesome. And then yeah. You keep going, you'll see it's somebody else.
Yeah, so instead of singing about BitConnect, he sings about responsibility.
Oh my god, that's great.
Yeah, it was kind of a little awkward, but it definitely was comical. A good laugh. Anybody who hadn't seen it, definitely check that out.
I mean, yeah, I still need to watch that myself, so I don't really have anything to say actually. But ready for a trademark Shinobi segue?
Yeah, man.
Ding. This seems to be a recurring thing. Finnish crypto service provider Prasos has lost 4 out of their 5 banks. And this is a company ran by Henry Braid, for those unfamiliar. And they pretty much have no idea why. And yeah, I mean, like this is becoming more and more of a systemic issue as things go on. In order to be a business that's not functioning purely on Bitcoin, you need banking relationships. And in order to be a business purely functioning on Bitcoin, you need to accept extreme market volatility, which is not really a wise thing to do for the vast majority of businesses out there, because you still have operational costs, you still have employees to pay, you still have whatever product you're selling or providing to actually pay for. And I don't see this stopping anytime soon. I mean, we've seen this kind of stuff happen with Finex last year in Taiwan. It's starting to happen all across Europe. Not to the same degree, but we even started to see examples of this affect American businesses. And I mean, this really does seem like a coordinated thing at this point, where almost all of the banks out there are just completely cutting off crypto businesses from their accounts.
Yeah, I want to see what happens now that Goldman Sachs owns an exchange. Something tells me that exchange is not going to have its bank accounts closed.
I mean, that's part of it. That's a big part of this issue, is they can exert their monopoly position, like them being banks, as they kind of dip their toes into this space and pretty much prevent competition from actually having access to banking services. And I mean, this is a kind of a very insidious way we could start seeing the space malevolently monopolized as time goes on, because we're nowhere near the market capitalization and the amount of liquidity attracted to that to really make it a viable option to just deal in Bitcoin and never touch fiat as a business. And what can we really do about this?
Yeah, and I'm not sure about Finland's status in terms of becoming a cashless society, but it's basically right next to Sweden. And Sweden is, I think, one of the most cashless societies in the world, besides one country in, I think, somewhere in Africa. And stuff like this should scare people, because if you're in a cashless society, you have all your money in a bank. If your bank decides, because of your interest in cryptocurrencies, that they want to shut down your bank account, you're screwed. You have no money for anything, because most places don't even accept cash anymore. It's just insane. So this, especially if you're living in a country where paying with card is now the standard instead of cash, and you don't really have too many options. Like, it should scare you that banks are coming down this hard, you know, in countries that are supposedly some of the freest in the world. Like, that should scare people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's, you know, like, you get a little tinfoily. I mean, like, you know, you have like people out there screaming like conspiracies of the Rothschild and chipping everybody's hands and being able to close out your access to financial services at a snap. But I mean, you know, shave off the whole Rothschild and the conspiracy theory nonsense from that. And like, we actually are sliding in that direction. I mean, like, cryptocurrencies are brand new. It's something like just getting up to 10 years old. And we're already seeing like insane clampdowns on any kind of access to the financial services that they need to like thrive, actually have liquidity, like keeping them growing and keeping them afloat. And if these types of financial institutions are going to abuse the position they're in to undermine effectively a competition like that, what are they going to do if there is no competition? Like, if there's absolutely nothing keeping them in check as an alternative people can switch to. And I mean, you know, like I said, shave off the whole Rothschild YouTube video conspiracy nonsense from that. And I mean, does that really seem that crazy as a direction that the world is moving in financially?
Well, it certainly doesn't seem crazy as far as like others trying to control others in that direction. But I mean, like, at the same time, I think we are seeing kind of like a pushback from that, where it's like, you know, at the same time, there still is like the Bitcoin market. And I don't know. I just feel like there's, you know, the banking relationships with Bitfinex, they did recently, you know, partner with Ing. And, you know, there are some banks that are trying to like make a name for themselves by being involved in Bitcoin. And so I don't know. I think there is some pushback against that. And like, you know, those will be the guys that will be the winners in the future. I mean, the ones that try to push that perspective, yeah, I mean, like, nobody wins in that direction, not even the people in charge there. So I don't know. I mean, to me, I think that it's kind of an, you know, it'll be a pushback. I mean, hopefully, I mean, I don't think we'll get to that Orwellian, that terrible part. I think there'll always be like some pushback there.
Yeah, it's definitely a mess. I mean, the Death Star exists and it's powerful, but it's going down, baby.
That's right, man.
All right, now that my tinfoilery is done, let's check up with Mount Gox, where you have Mark Karpeles trying to claw back into the limelight here, saying he advised the trustee against selling on the open market. And if we actually slide along here, so did Kraken as well. I mean, they the first thing they said was don't sell the coins. The second thing they said, if you have to, you can do it through an auction, which Kraken themselves could facilitate. If you want to do it more privately, then you can use an OTC desk, which Kraken has one. I mean, it's like, I mean, like, the fact that this is going on, like, to repeat myself, it just boggles my mind. Like, I can think of no reason why these coins are liquidated on the open market other than somebody being short on a futures market to personally profit off of it, or some other ulterior motive to dump the Bitcoin price down. I mean, like,
yeah, I don't know. The whole full story on those Gox coins is always kind of like, I don't know, just like Jihan's motives. I don't really know the whole story, but it definitely, yeah, I don't know. It's like something where I wish I could know like who exactly the trustee is and what they were thinking, other than, yeah, I mean, I guess they needed the fiat. I don't know. probably just wanted to take the price, like you're saying.
I mean, they could just be a troll. I mean, they could just wanted to create the greatest meme ever. Mount Gox wrecked Bitcoin twice.
Yeah, I think that that's yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if it is a troll.
Mm-hmm. All right, so who's heard of the Bitcoin Misery Index?
Oh my lord, this thing was pretty comical.
Right.
Yeah.
I have not.
Another indicator for all the traders out there obsessed with indicators. Woo! But pretty much this is kind of just an indicator with a point system showing how far.
Oh God, Shinobi, the crypto masterclass ad.
Okay, everybody ignore that. Everybody ignore this. Do not look at this. I am drawing your attention away from it.
Dude, if we're going to keep doing this, we need to at least get some affiliate fees out of it.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, don't listen to it.
But it's kind of like the RSI, Relative Strength Index, or the MACD, Moving Average Convergence and Divergence. But it's pretty much just memes looking at averages and where things are compared to that to tell you whether to buy or sell or not. And obligatorily, I must say that indicators are not perfect. If you just blindly do what some indicator says, one of the times it's going to come back and wreck you. So please do not run off and just start trading on this stupidity.
But Shinobi, technical analysis is so solid. It has so many years behind it.
No, it's not. I make money just
100 years
and doing
100 years of
I have
science.
no idea what I'm doing, and I make money. Okay, it's all nonsense. It's all memes.
You don't even have to draw lines. You just have to look at whether or not the Bitcoin community is in misery, and then to buy. That's it.
Mm-hmm. But this meme, if you would have, is saying that now is a good place to buy. I would not just blindly listen to it. Do what you were going to do anyways. But yeah, and the funny thing about indicators like this is you go back and you back test them. This is, I think, most of the historical price history of Bitcoin. Here was an instance back in 2011, said buy, and nope, kept going down. But I mean, overall, I think it's not been too bad as far as like the accuracy of things, but I just I think it's really funny they call it the Bitcoin Misery Index.
Right.
Shinobi, what makes me really miserable? The fact that you have 2 masterclass ads.
Holy crap, dude! How does that happen? Oh, look, they saw you. They
2 dose.
They're duplicating. They're breeding.
Were you trying to pitch your number 2 there, G?
Oh no, but that's funny. No, I think we can check it out. It says expert reveals top cryptocurrencies set to overtake Bitcoin.
God, yeah.
How could we not click on that?
Okay, so the Bitcoin symbol is like a sun, and the bits are going into his face. What is that supposed to mean?
Because the bits coming out of his face, and that's the next Bitcoin he's created in his mind.
Yeah. But I don't know. Long story short with the BMI though is if you do trade, here's another thing you can look at as far as memes to inform your trade. Don't blindly depend on them. Don't just do what they say without any other analysis or thought. But yeah, it's a major publication is literally reporting on a Bitcoin specific indicator. I mean,
I could just imagine. Like, I don't, I do the buy and hold thing now. I don't really pay too much attention to the charts when it does come to buying stuff, other than, when it drops, I buy some more. Like, I just can't imagine trying to play it like through every angle and be like, well, did you check check this thing. Did you check the Bitcoin misery index? Oh man, what does that have to say? Like, I just like factoring it into your decision making. Like, yeah, it's kind of comical.
Well, see, that's the thing with like indicators. It's you should never, ever, ever just go off one. Like if you are trading and using indicators, check them all. Like find the ones you see accuracy with and cross-check them all. Don't just pick something and just do what it says like it's your robot overlord telling you when to jump. Like put all of the information out in front of you and don't act unless most of it is aligning to paint the same picture. But yeah, mostly I just think it's hilarious. There's an indicator called the Bitcoin Misery Index.
Janine said that her ex-girlfriend once told her she trades based on the moon and the stars, and I think that is as legitimate of an indicator as anything that I've ever heard.
I literally just draw lines on charts and just meme stuff. Like I have no idea what I'm doing and somehow still make money most of the time.
Yeah, it actually ended up working.
Going up. It's pretty hard to lose money when it's going up as much as it has been over the last few years.
Yeah, that's why I don't give credit to any of these indicators or strategies, because it's like, I'm sorry, the Bitcoin price has gone up. If you did not make money in the last half year, so you're basically an idiot. Like, if you have any Bitcoin at all, you made money. Like,
I'll tell you the problem I've run into is people that trade on that moon and stars information, but they made money on Ethereum or something. Then it's like, oh goodness, you can't get them to calm down about it. Jeez.
Yep.
But yeah, just it's all memes, people. Just it's all just memes. But switcheroo. Something badass is happening. Every Git merge for Bitcoin Core is now being open timestamped and stamped into the Bitcoin blockchain. So not only is Git keeping track of things, now you have the Bitcoin blockchain being a temporal anchor showing you roughly when different things were merged. So the auditability of what's going on with that repo and that software right now has just hit an awesome new fucking level. And for those of you who don't know what open timestamps is, you should be ashamed of yourself and you should go to opentimestamps.org and look at it. It is awesome. It is a protocol piggybacking on top of Bitcoin anybody can run a server for that just aggregates everything you give it in terms of data into a huge Merkle tree that it stamps into every Bitcoin blockchain or block. So it is literally something I want to see. I hope I will see. I think I will see that could be used to literally timestamp the internet every 10 minutes. Like any piece of data, anything you can plug it into, you can prove existed in a certain state at a certain time through the Bitcoin blockchain without doing your own op return, without spending money on fees, because it is literally infinitely extensible. Like you could literally timestamp the entire internet into the Bitcoin blockchain with a single transaction every block. And I mean, it's not financial. You can't invest in it and make money. But personally, I think this is one of the coolest fucking things that has been done with Bitcoin as far as the non-financial aspect of things go. And it's now being used to make Bitcoin development even more auditable than it was before.
Totally. One of the things that, just to kind of illustrate why this is cool, is if you can imagine somebody going back and changing GitHub, right? Like an employee that works at GitHub, they could go in and they could, in theory, change the code or roll back the code or introduce a vulnerability. And then it would be dicey to figure out, like, do we patch it? Was it there before or whatever? Now that attack vector is basically eliminated, right? Like you can be confident that the Bitcoin core software looked exactly like this at a given point in time. So it is really cool. It's a cool idea.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, like I said, this can be used for anything. I mean, like, I want to see in the next few years a website plugin where you can just have that website timestamped every block. News websites, they have a tendency to just go back and edit things 3, 4, 10, 15 times in a day and just obscure their fuck ups or hide things. Well, if we start pretty much shaming people who don't utilize tools like this into using them, or else we don't believe you, we can start fixing those kinds of problems.
Are you like trying to describe revision control journalism without actually saying it?
Well, I mean, not just in like the development process. I mean, like you can see the whole process of development with your project, and that is a brilliant thing. But I mean, just apply that to anything. Some random asshole's blog, some like politician's Twitter account. Like, you can generalize that to any information out there. But
yeah, that's why I listed it as one of the tools that I'm planning to use as part of the model. I haven't started any development with it yet. I'm still kind of just doing my investigations on GitHub using archive services, but in the future going to be integrating that. So I like the fact that I would really like if more usable open timestamp plugins and stuff were made available to people, because then they could help me like make sure stuff gets timestamped so that by the time I find it, I don't have to be late.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, like everybody who hasn't seen this brought up on the show before or read this needs to read this now. But Jihan is actually putting together like a whole framework and system for standardizing this kind of stuff specifically for journalists. And like, this is the kind of shit that we need to start doing. Like, Bitcoin is money, Bitcoin is sound money, and that is something that the world sorely needs. But a Merkle tree is infinitely extensible. And all you really need to keep limited in terms of Bitcoin is whatever is in that Merkle tree related to transactions and Bitcoins moving. Everything else you can extend into infinity and prove that something exists at a certain time in a certain state. And I mean, yeah, like, you can use that for anything you can imagine.
Yeah, I think that, the open timestamps tool is an amazing thing that should be adapted towards more stuff, like you're saying. And the whole revision control journalism that Jihan's doing with that, I think that's like exactly like right on where it's a good place to start with it. And just like maybe we can get a little bit more accountability with our news and our information.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like I said, not even just news. It's like, hey, I know a lot of people out there not really fond of our president and other politicians. And as time goes on, I say something stupid, try and delete that real quick. Nope, it's not going to fly anymore. Like, okay, I'm gonna stop rambling, and we're gonna slide along to the next story.
All right, what's the next one?
Jihan wants to take the lead on Keybase, making me want to cry inside.
Oh man, what's going on here?
Yeah, so this is pretty funny because literally the day before this was announced, we were on Block Digest. We were like, "Hey, I think we should all move to Keybase because our current setup is a bit insecure." I mean, we're not discussing like super conspiratorial, important stuff, but might as well move to Keybase. The next day, then it's like, okay, this announcement: Keybase partners with the Stellar Development Foundation. And I wouldn't really care generally. I mean, it's Keybase. It's like they're basically, they are a server like The MIT server that it's a directory for people's keys, makes it really easy to find. It's very usable. I like Keybase. But their blog post explaining the partnership, most people were not very happy with it because it says some very wrong things, especially with regards to Bitcoin's energy use and transaction speeds and fees and things. There's just not a lot of. It doesn't really show that Keybase has an understanding of cryptocurrencies and how they work and why they have scaling issues, and the fact that every cryptocurrency is going to have scaling issues once it gets popular. It's not something that has really been solved yet. What I did find funny before you go to the blog post is that right after he made this announcement, there was a ton of like, hey, we're doing a giveaway below the Keybase tweets, which is just hilarious because it's like, yep, you dip your toe in the water and you dip your toe in the stellar water. Well, you're going to get a lot of scammers, anything Ethereum related, anything. Yeah. If once you like attract the cryptocurrency spam bots, you're in for trouble. But now if we go to the actual blog post, they should have just really kept it really standard and said, hey, Stellar Development Foundation is going to giving us money for development. We may be doing some collaboration that we'll talk about later in the year. Like, they didn't have to go into like why they chose Stellar. I feel like that's basic. Like, first of all, they haven't even told us what they're using Stellar for. So the idea that they can say Stellar is better for this doesn't make sense because we don't know what it's better for. What are you using it for? No idea because they haven't announced it yet. But so they go through several of these points about why they like Stellar, and they say transaction fees are 0. Well, yeah, we've talked about why that's bullshit. Because no one uses Stellar. Sorry. Also, it's not exactly decentralized. Like, I know apparently I should not say that Stellar is a fork of Ripple, even though it's very close and it was made by the same person who made Ripple. I guess saying it's a fork is inaccurate. I'll take that, but it's basically very close to Ripple in terms of its architecture, where it has this trusted list of nodes. So not very interesting in that regard. Fast. Apparently, first of all, I don't know what average ledger time is. I'm assuming they mean block confirmation. It's a weird phrase. I don't know what it means. Average ledger time. I don't know. Maybe it's how long the ledger exists. Anyway. 4.74 seconds. That's really fast. I bet they have a really high orphan rate, and transactions and orphan forks really suck on that network. That's not exactly positive. Also, if it's centralized, of course you can do. Yeah, JW says it's slow for a database. Yeah, it is actually. It's not that actually impressive for a more centralized system. Third point, Stellar is not bad for the environment because apparently Bitcoin is going to consume 1/500th of all the electricity in the world. Well, 1/500th is, I mean, it depends. If you're talking about percentages, like percentage per year, I have no idea where it would be great if they could actually cite where they get some of these statistics, because I really highly doubt. Oh, they got it from Digiconomist. Great. That is the article that has been the bane of my existence for the past year or so, because it's completely wrong. It completely misunderstands how mining works, and the fact all of these measurements are measuring like the amount of energy that goes into one transaction, which makes no sense. It has nothing to do with the number of transactions in the block. We can scale Bitcoin to have more transactions in a block, and that will not change any of this. So that doesn't make sense. Anyway, Digiconomist there's a whole bunch of articles debunking that. So the fact that they use that as a source is really terrible. But I also like to point out that the IT sector as a whole, I think, uses 17, I think it's somewhere between 7 and 17% of the world's energy, like the entire energy sector. So 1/500th, if that even is a real statistic, is actually not a lot. I don't know. I doubt it's that much. But yeah.
Janine, but think about the penguins on the North Pole.
Yeah.
Bitcoin will kill them.
The Arctic sea ice. That's all you need to know about this thing. Is that
That's
they
why
actually have a graph of the Arctic sea ice to explain why Stellar is better than Bitcoin.
I don't. I'm a bit confused what's even measuring. What is extent? Does anyone know what extent is?
You're not
I guess
supposed to
that's-
ask that.
That's the extent that it
Source.
it freezes and it extent out that far.
Source. Some
The
dude
source.
on Twitter. I
Some
don't
dude
know.
on Twitter, I don't know. Wow, is this a joke? This is a joke. This is a joke, right?
This is even worse than I remember it because I read through it. I was like, "Oh, this is garbage." Now that I'm actually looking at it, it's even worse. Oh,
It's
jeez.
very likely the world is at great risk right now, and as cryptocurrency scales, scales, the share of blame it shoulders for climate change will scale, comma 2.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the epitome of science in the 21st century.
Right. Oh my goodness.
If there's another civilization hearing this broadcast, please rescue us.
Okay, so if you're interested in about like the environmental criticisms of Bitcoin, there's plenty of stuff. If you just quickly jump to my tweet thread that's right next to this tab, I put a bunch of resources. I think the second tweet, or yeah, that one right there. So I put a bunch of resources about disputing a lot of the claims that a lot of these environmental concern articles have. So that point really doesn't make sense. And it's kind of funny because in that point in the blog post, because I believe this article was written by the Keybase CEO, Chris, I don't know how to pronounce it. I think it's Chris Coyne, Coyne.
ICO coming soon.
Yeah, Chris Coyne. That would be funny. But yeah, in the blog post, I think at the end of that environmental section, he actually says, I suspect that a lot of these figures are overestimated, but so he knows something is wrong with this, but I don't know, he's not willing. It's kind of sad that, to promote Ripple, you have to use, Stellar, oops, slipped up there. To promote Stellar, you have to use all of this misinformation to convince people that it's worth using. Do you not have any examples that actually make sense? I guess that's part of the problem though. So if you go back to the blog post, what else do we have here? Other projects jumping on board. Okay, so this is also part of my tweet thread. They mention the fact that Moxie, creator of Signal, is going to be creating mobile coin using Stellar. Yeah. So I had a thread about that several months ago about why that's a bad idea, because I was actually I just happened to be at a meetup space in London where some people that were talking about making a coin or a token for Signal. I don't know if it's the same one. I don't know if it's the same teams, but they were collaborating with Moxie, so it's very possible it could be the same team. And we talked about, what I don't know if it's the case, but yeah. So I happened to be there. I got an early look at some of that discussion, and it just sounded weird to me. I think having a token for Signal is a bit overblown, but Moxie really, with this mobile coin thing, took it to the extreme. So if you go to my tweet thread again, if you want to read more about that, basically it's what Signal is going to do is they're going to have the blockchain, which you will not be able to ever see. It will be stored in Intel SGX, which is a closed source thing that a lot of cryptocurrency projects like the Ledger wallet and a lot of things, they've started using Intel SGX for an enclave. For secure key storage and authentication services or something like that. And it's just really, or not authentication, but what's the word?
Authorization?
No, it's not authorization.
What does it do? What are you trying to describe? I'll tell you what the word is.
Go to my tweets, because if you go to my tweet, I think I might have used the word. Go up to the top, the one that I linked to right there. Yeah, right. Yep. So that's the thread about. Go back up to the first quote. I think he might have mentioned it in here.
Words.
It starts with an A, and I can't remember it. My brain is like fried.
Just skip the word and describe the concept.
Attestation. There we go. Yes, that's it.
I wouldn't have come up with attestation. So
attestation. Yeah. So they want to use Intel SGX not only to store the ledger, which you will never see. It's public, but not simultaneously never accessible or viewable by humans. Interesting definition of the word public. Yeah. So the blockchain, if it can even be called a blockchain, is going to be stored in Intel SGX. That's going to be fun. So that is apparently one of the best use cases of Stellar, ladies and gentlemen.
And real quick, I haven't really dug into this yet, so I just want to mention it. But guess what? Recently, a Spectre vulnerability was exploited to punch through SGX security. Golf clap.
Because none of us expected that to happen.
Right.
Yeah, but it's just like, it kills me to see this with Keybase. It's like, Signal, now Keybase, like all of the open source tools out there that I am happy to see out there are all gravitating towards scammy shit coins in this space. And it's just like, Jesus, stop.
Yeah.
I've almost reached a zen with all of this, and that is thinking back to the .com era where every business had to register like a short .com name, and they were going for like millions of dollars, and everybody was freaking out because nobody understood that like it doesn't really matter if you own Pepsi.com unless you're actually going to sell Coca-Cola, unless you're going to sell your drink online. It's kind of stupid. Like there's really no purpose. And I feel like that's happening. Like, it's not all about Ethereum anymore. Now it's about Stellar. But what's great is that Ethereum and Stellar now have to spend double the marketing money or more, right? Because they're competing now for stupid people's attention. And we need to have like 1,500 of these things, because until it becomes no longer cost effective to market these scams, because you just can't be heard over the noise of the other people, like the barrier to entry is so low. So yeah, I really hope that we end up doing something like take ForkGen, wire that up with like BISC or some decentralized exchange, and you could just like drop a half a Bitcoin and it'll automatically do everything, right? Like create a logo, throw up a marketing site, spin up the first miner, and throw it up on the exchange. And when it's that easy to just do that, then maybe we'll finally be able to stop talking about this stupid crap. Like there's nothing dumber than Ripple, except for maybe Stellar, except for maybe Ethereum. It's all just so dumb.
Yeah, and speaking of Ethereum, in that section of the blog post, they also they said that as Rick mentioned, there is a project called Kick that is switching from Ethereum to Stellar, and they said, we've been using Ethereum to date, but to be honest, I call it the dial-up era of the blockchain.
Right. Like,
I mean, I guess, yes, I would agree with that in terms of like where the infrastructure is. I mean, I've never using Bitcoin, I've never felt that it's like dial-up. Ethereum might be a different case because, CryptoKitties, and that really slowed everything down. But yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of infrastructure and where everything could go, I guess blockchains in general are in a dial-up area. I don't, or in the dial-up era. I don't know if it's kind of sad to say that that Ethereum is not preferable to Stellar. But because the thing is, a lot of people were saying a lot of this same stuff about Ethereum having faster transaction confirmation and lower fees than Bitcoin. It's like, oh, and then it cut up. So you don't think that's going to happen to Stellar? Pretty sure you're making a mistake there if you don't think this is also going to happen to Stellar if Stellar ever gets popular. Like, the only reason you have low fees is because no one else is using the blockchain. So great job for the few projects that have decided to use Stellar. You're on a blockchain that hasn't been overtaken by cats yet.
But it's actually even worse than that, because this is like the natural evolution of all the stupidity that Ethereum represents. Because Stellar isn't going to have those problems because it's not a blockchain. It's a database. And so the fact that they have 4.2 second transaction time, I think they did that on purpose, because if you said that we had like sub-millisecond transaction time, people would go, oh yeah, like MySQL, right? Or, you know, like it's got to be inefficient enough to sound like there's some security magic happening, but there isn't. It's just a database. So they can just turn that stuff off and stop faking it. And yeah, I mean, I think we're finally at the point, hopefully, where all of that nonsense will just blur into full-on databases, and then we can just have databases in Bitcoin again instead of all this stuff pretending to be in between.
I gotta point out a comment from Nopar in the troll box. He contests the Ethereum as a dial-up version of the blockchain because dial-up internet was actually useful.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
It was the best in breed. It was like the height of human capability at that point. And Ethereum is not that. Excellent point.
Not at all. Like, I think that's just like a easy out for them to try and say something to say like why we're using Stellar. But I mean, like, it is something where, like, you know, some of the people that I know that are on about Ethereum, they do talk about it's like, well, it's running into these issues, like we're saying with CryptoKitties and stuff, and its own scaling issues and everything. So I guess there is like something to be said, like to go to some other platform. But like the Keybase thing, like I don't know, I was just like thinking like when Keybase came out, like they really integrated Zcash addresses, and so I just like kind of know like they sort of like it wasn't like. I think at that point in time, Zcash was still kind of like, oh, you know, it's trying to be very secure and private. And so maybe that's why it went along. But it does sort of just seem like there's these sort of inside groups that are, you know, it's like, hey, you know, we've got a pretty big user base. Let's just add your address format to our user base. And then we get a pump going. And I don't know. It just definitely seems a little crazy to try and be like, for some reason, we need to use Stellar. I don't understand it. But
well, and that's the thing that frustrates me is that, like, as I said at the start of this, we don't know what they're planning to do with Stellar. Like, we don't know what the collaboration is. We don't know if they're adding something to Keybase or whatever. So all of these arguments they're making about why Stellar is better, it's not why Stellar is better for our project. It sounds like why Stellar is better than Bitcoin. And that's why I ended up criticizing it. Like, if they had just said, oh, Stellar works for our project, well, we don't know what your project is, so we can't really judge that now because we don't know what it is. But all of these points that they have in this blog post are why Stellar is better than Bitcoin or Ethereum. And it's like, sorry, you're really skating on thin ice there, because Stellar is a big baby, and Bitcoin and I mean at least Ethereum has been around for 3 years now, about 3 years, a little under 3 years, 2.5. But Bitcoin's been around for almost a decade. So for you to come out and say Stellar is better than Bitcoin, you better bring some heavyweight arguments, because that's not going to fly. Because if like it's a whole separate area of argument when you're saying Stellar is better than Bitcoin versus Stellar just works for whatever project we're working on. It's a different thing to argue.
yeah, that's a good point. Like it would be, I don't know. It seems like if they were going to announce something about Stellar and Keybase, they should be mentioning like why exactly they're doing it and what the use is and all that sort of stuff. And to just sort of like put in this arbitrary information from some dude on Twitter about Arctic sea ice and how Bitcoin's wasting energy, it just really does go to, I don't know. Maybe it's just to like enough market signal for the smart enough people to be like, yeah, this is BS, while other people aren't. Or it's something that is like you're saying, you know, we announced like, oh, we're having trouble and, you know, maybe we should move over to Keybase. And then the next day this happened. It's just, it was kind of upsetting to see, but you know, I guess like shouldn't be too surprised at this point in time with basically everybody trying to get as much returns as they can on all this sort of stuff while it's still wild, wild, wild west.
And at this point, I don't feel like, I mean, I don't know what they're doing yet, so I don't feel strongly compelled to like leave Keybase, especially if whatever they're working on is not something that's going to be forced on me. And to be honest, like if the Stellar Development Foundation has enough money that they're giving it to Keybase development, like that seems like a way better use of money than putting it towards developing Stellar. So, you know, you know, pluses and minuses about this, but I think I don't know. I don't feel like leaving Keybase at this point, especially before even knowing what they're doing. I don't agree with the fact that they presented their collaboration in this fashion, but I don't feel like jumping off of Keybase because I think it's still a valuable product.
I'm sticking with them to the end for the penguins at the North Pole, man.
Right. Gotta worry about Bitcoin mining ruin our sea ice.
What is that? There used to be this like online penguin meeting game for kids. What was that called?
I have no idea.
Meet the penguins.
It's like Meet the Penguin. I don't think that was it. It was like a really popular like chat game that I guess people could like customize their igloos or something. It closed down recently, so that reminded me of that's what I thought of. No, it wasn't that. I really don't know because I never joined it, but it was like one of the most popular chatting websites for kids for a while. But then apparently the reason it kind of shut down is like when you know, some Nazis figured out, hey, there's kids there, so they would start posting swastikas and it would actually work.
Oh no,
it's really bad.
It's funny that you reference that because Kik is actually what that is now. It's a huge, I mean, it's basically Facebook for 12 and under, and it's all text based from what I understand. But they're the ones that are switching over from Ethereum to Stellar.
Club Penguin, that's what it was. There we go, Club Penguin.
And now it's Kik. And it's going to be on Stellar. Woo!
I don't know, man. That Kik platform, all I've ever heard about is prostitutes on there. But I don't know, probably some kids too.
No, I mean, that's hard to recover from that one, but that is their target market. They have like
I don't know what it is, but I mean, like, hey, you just started like, I mean, yeah, apparently like prostitutes use Kik. I don't know.
Yeah, it might be. I don't know. They claim that they have something like
I don't know. That's what I heard.
70% of like early teens in the U.S. on Kik right now.
Kik, bringing prostitutes and children together at last.
And Stellar, and that might be the worst of it.
Oh man, I'm sorry. I didn't know that like kids chatting. Like seriously, the only thing I'd ever heard about Kik was like, you know, back page ads and hit me up on Kik, you know. I don't know. That's what I've heard about.
I've never heard of Kik. I've only heard of Club Penguin. So
okay. Well, yeah. That's I hadn't heard of
Club
Penguin.
Doesn't it sound like Kik might actually be for teens and Club Penguin might be for prostitutes?
I don't know. That's what I'm wondering. Maybe we got everything all backwards. I don't know.
All right, trademark Shinobi segue. Go. I am interested to see if this actually pans out. Because right now, there is a company, Blockrize, that wants to start issuing credit cards and give reward points back in cryptocurrency. Anybody else think that this is like hyper Bitcoinization evolving?
Right? Come on, crypto rewards points.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what exactly is the business model? Are they basically buying your air miles from you for cryptocurrency? Is that what happens?
No, their plan is pretty much just give you 1% back in cryptocurrency for purchases in either Bitcoin or Ethereum. And so, like, there's not really too much here, but I am really interested to see if this can kind of take off and get some some legroom under it, because this is not really that bad of an idea in my opinion. I mean, you like rewards points now, like you're giving something back in terms of monetary value. So why not cryptocurrency?
Wait,
so just to clarify how this all works, right now, if you go and grab a typical credit card in the US, you can get maybe something like 1% cash back for everything that you buy. So you go and you buy a pair of shoes for $100. You owe them $100, but you'll have something on your statement that says you actually got 1% back. And that's because the credit card companies charge like 3 or 5%, or, you know, they take a big chunk. So they're basically just giving you a kickback of the money that you don't realize that you're spending, right? Because those shoes should have been $95, but Visa and MasterCard won't let the shoe seller charge a different price for cash versus credit. They'll cut them off. So you don't really realize this, but your shoes are actually, even in an in-person purchase, maybe $5 more expensive, right? 5% more expensive than they would be. So they take one of those dollars and give them back to you. So you feel really good about it. And it's kind of this brilliant, evil scheme where everybody wants cash back. So they tend to use credit cards more, which makes the merchants even under more pressure to make sure they accept Visa, MasterCard, which creates that 5%, steal move, or that 5% grab. So what they're doing here is they're just saying, instead of giving you 1% back in cash, we'll give you 1% back in cryptocurrencies. And it's kind of brilliant. I mean, the whole system is like brilliant evil, but this is definitely an interesting new spin on it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that's that's not going to make me want to use a credit or debit card. I'm sorry. I live in a country where there are like most stores on the street do not even take card because they don't want to participate in that scheme. So I'm good.
That's awesome.
Cash is good. And I've
amazing.
I've also never bought Bitcoin, so that wouldn't make sense for me to get it as a reward.
So in Germany, where you're at, there's a lot of places that don't accept cards at all. They don't accept Visa, MasterCard. They only accept cash.
Yeah, most restaurants you go into in Germany, they like, unless it's like if it's like a chain, like a franchise restaurant, they probably will. But if it's just an ordinary restaurant, unless it's really big, most of them don't take card at all.
That makes me happy. There's hope.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, for people who do, or like in places that aren't abnormally logical, like Germany, I mean, this is an awesome idea. I mean, people who are using their credit cards anyway, building up debt, like, fuck it. Oh, why not get that reward back in cryptocurrency? Get Bitcoin in more people's hands. And I mean, you pull that off of the platform if that's how they're structuring it, and then hey, you have Bitcoin in your hand. Like, nobody can take that away from you unless you mishandle your security. And like, fuck it. Like, why not? Let's find as many ways as possible to get Bitcoin in people's hands.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical of how because they say on that page that they're going to do it without fees. So like, are they literally sending you like $1 or something of Bitcoin every time you make a transaction, or do they like tally it up at the end of the month they send you a reward in cryptocurrency? Like, how often are they making transactions, and how are they handling the fees?
Well, I think with the fees they meant like in terms of like getting whacked with a fee from them for that, you know,
like commission or something.
Either which way, I mean, it does sort of play into, I mean, like, as somebody that is, considered, I mean, like, you're gonna have to get a credit card at some point in the United States. It's like, if you want to travel and rent a car and, do all these sort of things, it's like you sort of need a credit card. And I've been thinking about doing that. It's like, it makes me think like I should apply for this because, hey, it would be nice to get some, crypto cash back. I mean, just because, yeah, I like Bitcoin. So it'd be nice to get that in Bitcoin back, however, from the credit. I mean, that's what I'm just thinking. It's a good model to get customers. I mean, a lot of people like crypto, and like, like JW saying, I mean, it's kind of like the cashback thing. It's just like an incentive. It's like, yeah, I I mean, if I got to do it, might as well do something where I'm gonna, like what I get back.
I want cash back on my 30-cent pretzel purchases.
What? Wait, a hot pretzel is 30 cents for you? Are you kidding me? There are multiple dollars in here, and I have to hunt, and it's like a hunter-gatherer searching for them, paying whole dollars.
I mean, they're not hot. I mean, they're not cold, but mostly I don't care about the temperature. I mostly care about whether they're like rock hard because they've been sitting on the shelf all day, or whether they're squishy, and usually they're squishy.
I have a feeling Shinobi gets his pretzels at the 7-Eleven or the gas station where he buys his chicken. So I bet they're not super fresh from a bakery. But what I really love about this scheme is that it combines like the worst of both worlds. Like you have a credit card and you're exposing all of your personal data, all your purchases, you're putting all that in one nice big juicy database. Like we can find out when that data leaks, like where you shop, how often you shop, which items you like to buy, where you go on vacation, right? Like I can map out your entire existence because you're using a credit card for every economic exchange. And then on top of that, I can also now figure out all the beautiful evil that Coinbase offers because I'll know how much cryptocurrency that you've earned over the years. So when that database gets dumped, it will be truly glorious, and I would not recommend you use it.
Well, that's like I mean, I guess you're talking in individual case, because I'm just like curious, like how do you rent a car then without a credit card?
Oh no, I do use credit cards when I have to. I avoid it as much as I can, but yeah, I mean, practically speaking, you're definitely going to have to sell out your privacy at multiple ways just to function in the US anyway. I mean, I know there's people that don't do that, but it's always a trade-off, right? Like I'm not going to lose out on a consulting customer because I refuse to rent a car. Maybe I should, but that's not my risk profile. Or it's not the way that I decide to do it. But I do try to minimize the amount of information I put in that database. So I do think that's a good idea. And then as far as buying Bitcoin, like just use BISC or use local Bitcoins. Like if you really want, like this is just the worst possible combination of every stupid thing that we've ever talked about. So if you want to achieve all of these same things, get a credit card, expose all your personal information, get your 1 or 2% cash back or whatever, and then go out and buy your Bitcoin with that. Don't correlate it any more than it already is.
I guess
it's going to be correlated, like regardless. When they don't actually mail you like dollar bills, but I mean, like if you're already a person who uses a credit card, like uses programs like this, I mean.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like if you're going to do that, do it, but then take the money and then actually at least separate out the fact that you own Bitcoin, right? Like buy your Bitcoin through cash, through the mail with local Bitcoins when you get your 2% back on your, whatever Visa card.
Well, my question for this would also be like, how do you, because for the people, who are concerned about having to report cryptocurrency stuff for taxes, how do you report these rewards in cryptocurrency? Does it count as you like buying it? Like, how do you even label it? Is it a purchase?
I think the rewards, that's a good point, but I think the rewards are treated like income, maybe. That would be my guess. So not only do they take 5% of you from the purchase, they give you 1% back, and then you have to pay taxes on it.
And capital gains if it goes up in value.
Yeah, exactly. Well, my guess is when you actually withdraw it or they give it to you, they probably just give it to you in cash. I don't know if they actually give you the Ethereum or the Bitcoin, but at that point in time, whatever it is that they give you, there would be you'd have to know what the value of it was, and then you'd probably just pay income tax.
Actually, I'm pretty sure that the IRS looks at rewards points like a discount and not a taxable income. So unless
that could be.
Treat it differently being crypto, then I think you should be fine.
Oh, so that's like a way for people to get untaxed cryptocurrency.
I guess. Yeah.
It's like all ways to avoid taxes in the US. You just burn $1 and they'll let you keep a dime.
Yeah, I don't know. After this little discussion, I think I should just stick to the idea of just getting the best like travel rewards, because it's the only time I'd use the credit card anyway, is for like, like you're saying, rent a car or something like that. So probably should do that instead of. But like I'm saying, it definitely appeals to me as somebody that likes Bitcoin. Whenever it comes to like applying for a credit card, it makes me think about it. But then, of course, you know, JW, you start talking about it. It's like, oh, yeah, well, you know, I guess, yeah, I should probably just stick to trying to get crypto outside of, I don't know, some place that's not trying to tackle down as much information about me as they can.
Mm-hmm. All right. Segue. The U.S. government is once again being a bunch of dumbasses. The U.S. Marshal Services are auctioning off 2,170 Bitcoin on March 19th, and that's about $20 million in Bitcoin. Now, as much as I hate the U.S. government, I think they're corrupt, retarded morons. I mean, come on, guys. Like, is it? I mean, is it really that far outside of where your brain goes to maybe consider trying to pass some exemption for cryptocurrencies as far as seized assets, and maybe just hold it? Maybe just have some source of revenue or income that isn't pretty much stolen from people to pay for the shit you do. I mean, in the long term, just look back to the Silk Road coins. Like, how much money would that have been to fill in budget gaps or handle programs that they're funding in retarded ways right now? And they still just go, here, take it and give me the cash. I mean, like, come on.
You know, but I think you underestimate how much fun American cops have when they engage in civil asset forfeiture.
Yeah, but I mean, just like, you know,
they have to play. They need some fun too.
It's shuffling money aside and just letting it increase in value, which it historically has done to ridiculous degrees. I mean, like, come on.
They want to get it in the right guy's hands before they let it increase in value. They got to sell it at the bottom, you know?
What I want to know is why this stuff doesn't end up stolen. If you're working for the U.S. Marshal Service right now, you should know that this is a pile of $20 million in untraceable electronic cash. And that if you've walked out with a few ounces of Coke or whatever it is that you've been able to put your hands on, it was so much more risky than if you can get your hands on these private keys. It'll be very hard to track you down. So I highly recommend you consider that possibility.
I hope that happens, man. But geez, yeah, please listen to that, because there's like there's a lot of money there and on the table, and there's a way that you can get around not being traced for it. And yeah, come on, Marshal Service. Like, I don't know. I just agree with Shinobi. It's like, it's stupid to sell this stuff. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just like, it really is aggravating when you go back and look at the Silk Road case, and then you look at all these budgets and the arguments and the conflicts, and it's just like, yeah, if they had just held that, they could have paid for a large portion of something that they're debating for right now. And yeah, it's aggravating. So yeah.
I'm glad they're selling it. I don't want them to hold it, because then they're just going to have a bigger chunk of money to do crazy stuff with in the future. Like, I think they're already well overfunded for whatever it is that they're supposed to be doing.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
And you know, like public schools in the U.S., you don't throw more money at a monopoly to get better service. So I don't want to throw more money at these guys through them holding on to Bitcoin and it appreciating. But I am surprised that it doesn't seem like it gets stolen as often. I mean, I was obviously joking. I'm not telling anybody they should commit a crime. It probably wouldn't work out well for you, but it does surprise me, like the chunk of money that was in what was it? There was that Eastern European country. They had like, was it $250 million or something worth of Bitcoin? Was it the Baltics?
Bulgaria?
Anyway, Bulgaria. Yeah, it was like, wasn't it like 25% or maybe it was 10% of their national debt that just walked off and they don't know what happened to it. I'm really surprised that that doesn't happen more often with these cases. I mean, the Silk Road case, there was a lot of money that was stolen by the FBI agents, but it seems like that's, I would expect it to happen every time. So it's kind of amazing that it doesn't happen every single time.
Yeah. I don't know. It's yeah, I don't know. You're right. I think I don't know. They should
fear
whatever,
will keep
man.
the
But, I'm just like kind of drawn because I'm thinking about like, the whole like giving each member of the government a Bitcoin to where it kind of incentivizes the government to actually treat. It's like, yeah, whatever. I don't know. I'm sorry, guys. Kind of everywhere.
It's all good, man. But I guess the last story for today. South Korea for the win. Keybase, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is working on integrating cryptocurrencies on their payment platform.
Cacao Pay. Cacao.
Yeah, it's cacao.
Okay, I'm sorry. I only speak American. Okay, forgive my ignorance. But yeah,
Did you like my accent there? It wasn't the German accent. That was my Japanese accent.
But I mean, like, this is like fucking awesome. I mean, if you look at like South Korea, like they're walking down the same path Japan is. Like exchanges are proliferating like crazy. Like they've set up a regulatory framework, which I want to remind everybody is being challenged in the Supreme Court. And now a major payment processor in the country is working on integrating cryptocurrencies. I mean, it's 12,000 merchants and millions of people who use this. I mean, like this, like seriously, like America needs to get off its ass and get on the ball because like Asia outside of China is just steamrolling forward with this shit. Like it is popping up everywhere. It is mainstream. Most people in their entire population are aware of cryptocurrencies and what they are. They're being used everywhere. Like people are investing in it in huge numbers. And like, I mean, if anybody listening buys into the entire hyper Bitcoinization argument, like the West is going to get left behind in the dust in terms of wealth. If we see like this laggard pace continue versus places like South Korea and Japan. I mean, like I still would struggle to find like more than maybe 10 places where I live that would accept Bitcoin like physically. And you have entire countries like rolling it out through major merchant platforms with millions of customers and tens of thousands of merchants. And I mean, like, if this is a game of increasing value and wealth redistribution through that process, countries like South Korea and Japan are going to come out on top. And I mean, if you buy into the hyper Bitcoinization argument, that's going to put them probably in the front runner of the world in terms of economic size and wealth if things keep going this way. So, I mean, like, come on, America, get your shit together.
But the good news is if you buy into the hyper Bitcoinization concept, which, God, I hate that word so much. I really, really do. But if you buy into the idea that we're going to have a global secure money and it's going to be Bitcoin, then none of this matters because South Korea, America, all nation states will cease to exist and we'll just be normal people and we won't be jealous that somebody else in another chunk of earth is doing well.
Yeah, that's well said.
I don't think.
I think there's still reasons to be jealous.
Yeah, but we'll be jealous equally, right? Like I won't be jealous that somebody in North Korea is doing well more than somebody in North Dakota. It'll just be two different places that are, hundreds of or thousands of miles away from me, and they'll just be other people. They won't be foreigners. They won't be like the enemy that we're having to try to starve economically. It'll just be other people. So that's what I'm hoping anyway.
But I mean, like this is seriously, it's fucking awesome. Like this, and for those of you who don't know, Keku Pay,
Ow.
oh my god,
Cacao.
whatever. They have a subsidiary that actually launched and owns Upbit, one of the bigger exchanges in Korea. So I mean, like this, this really is like turning into a fully fleshed out financial ecosystem that isn't just, you know, assholes like BitPay and Coinbase. Like it is actually spreading far and wide across major corporations in the country, not just the few little upstarts in the crypto space.
No, that's a good point. This is an interesting story because I definitely feel like we're not to the point where it makes sense to pay for most things with Bitcoin yet, because the receiver doesn't own Bitcoin, right? So you're going into Bitcoin and then you're going back out of Bitcoin, and you have now 2 fiat transactions instead of 1. And really, we're still at the phase where people should just be collecting it, right? Like the store of value phase or whatever. But stories like this kind of screw with that, my understanding of that, because if it really does roll out that rapidly, you know, we may see it happen, like I guess sort of in parallel, right? Like I know that's what everybody's been saying in the US, that, you know, and the BitPay's business model was based on that, and I think it was flawed, but it is kind of weird. I mean, if we have somebody like Twitter, you know, roll out the Cash app to every single Twitter account, then we could really move rapidly between those 2 phases, to where it's really just kind of a blur. And we couldn't have done that until now, but you know, if Lightning's up and running in the next 6 months, you know, I hope it's ahead of Cacao, right? Like I hope that we can handle it before Cacao goes, oh my gosh, you know, we need to use Stellar. But yeah, it's pretty exciting. It's pretty it's not a small number of people that are gonna have, you know, cryptocurrency enabled payments real soon.
Yeah, it's definitely a good point talking about the Cash app and Twitter.
You're wrong. It's Cacao. Ha ha.
Cacao. Oh, maybe.
No,
Maybe.
you're not using the right accent.
It's cacao in German.
What? Who?
No, it's Cacao. I just looked it up. I listened to a
Okay,
YouTube video. Everything on the internet.
That's the Korean pronunciation, but the German is cacao.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking of that place called Macau, so it sounds like it's right. Could be Cacao or Cacao, or either which way. It is a lot of people. Twitter's a lot of people, and Cash App, and you know, connected to Twitter, and like you're saying with Lightning Network, it's just yeah, it could happen quicker than, you know, we're thinking. I mean, I don't know. It seems like every time I'm like, oh, this could happen soon, it's like usually several years. But like if they did want to turn on those sort of services and just like do it, it doesn't seem like, you know, there's much hindrance in the way of the tools. Like the tools are there.
And I mean, you know, I think, you know, I definitely get where you're coming from, JW, but I think like things can kind of move more piecemeal and gradually. I mean, like the more the market cap and the stability of Bitcoin increases, the more people will want to hold it, but like not necessarily have the money or feel comfortable putting money in. And there'll be holders who might want to spend it just to realize gains. And so, I mean, if you start setting these rails up before it's really gotten to the point where it is widely and globally used in commerce regularly, like, you know, hey, that person might go, yeah, I'll take it. And a holder might spend a little bit just to realize some gains. And you might like encourage just a quicker pace at that distribution, where like somebody who wants to hold it but doesn't yet now can just accept it instead of going out and actually putting their own money into it. But I guess that was the last story for today. Come on, people, thoughts. Give them to me.
I have thoughts.
Okay, I have to get my Twitter thought ready. I'm gonna I'm gonna do what Janine does this one time. I'm gonna have a visual to go along with it.
I have visuals.
All right, thoughts incoming. Loading thoughts. Loading thoughts. Loading thoughts. Thoughts loaded.
Okay, so this one is a bit old. It's from March 3rd. But if you're in Germany, you may have heard that Project Gutenberg has been in a copyright dispute with the entire state of Germany because Germany, because Shinobi used the term abnormally logical. Well, when it comes to copyright, they are not logical. They are freaking out of their mind. Basically, if you grew up in Germany, in the last like 15 years, you know how to use a VPN because there is no way that you would ever be able to access large portions of the internet because of the German government. There's like songs on YouTube you can't see, all kinds of things. And so apparently the result of this copyright website or copyright lawsuit with Project Gutenberg is that Germany is now blocking access to Project Gutenberg, which is, if anyone doesn't know, it's one of the largest archives of like culturally important books, especially public domain books where the authors are long dead and they don't have one of those insane copyright claims that you have in the US where it's like the author's life plus 70 years. It's insane. So yeah, now Germany is trying to block the entire Project Gutenberg website, which doesn't make any sense because I would assume that most people who actually make use of it, they would probably be able to figure out how to install a VPN or something like that, use a proxy Tor project. Yeah, so it's not going to achieve its desired aim as usual, but it's kind of insane. And apparently they said they're going to appeal. So hopefully that ends up working.
Yeah, that's pretty freaking ridiculous. And I guess loading JW's thought. Loading thought. Loading thought.
I love that Project Gutenberg is going to be blocked in Germany. I love that irony there. All right, so my thought of the day is I'm excited about this project. I've been working on it for the last couple of years, and basically it is to teach programming and math by programming a robot. If you've ever played Lightbot, it's similar to that in concept, but it uses a Scala backend so that the programming language that the students use is actually really powerful, and you could have 40 functions nested and it would work fine. Yeah, I'm excited about it because I couldn't figure out a way to make it work without making it more fun than it is. And it's really hard to make it, it's hard to compete on just fun and have it be educational. But what I'm planning on doing now is charging Bitcoin for, something like algebra, and then giving the Bitcoin back to the student as they pass levels, so that there'll be enough additional incentive to complete the levels. So pretty excited about that. I hope it works because like I said, I've been working on it for a few years off and on, and I should be able to share more soon. So follow me on Twitter at WeathermanIam, and I'll keep leaking out what I've got as I have it. Over the next couple of weeks, I think I'll be able to let people play the first 10 levels or so and give me feedback.
Oh yeah, dude.
All
Looks
right.
like a pretty cool little robot.
Loading Rick's thought. There we go.
Yeah,
loaded.
So yeah, just like a couple of days ago, Nopara posted this, and I watched it and was just like really kind of shocked about how awesome the video was. It's just like a hour and 10-minute long presentation or hour-long presentation on basically just like the history of computing and programming and like how we got to where we're at, and how it might be relevant to come up with a discipline and to it's just it's really, I think anybody that's in the space and that's a programmer or computer science should watch this video. I think it is important. Like I watched it and was just I really gained like I don't know, some interesting thoughts from it afterwards. It's just like it spurred some interesting discussions, and like I'm saying, it's a great video. It's like this guy, Uncle Bob, he's like a friendly presenter and everything. It's entertaining to watch, and it's also very informative. And it was, I'd suggest anybody watch it that hadn't checked it out.
I just shout out a retweet on Block Digest so you guys can find it.
Cool.
Did it mention Ada Lovelace?
No.
Fail. What?
Okay, he pointed out.
You don't know who Ada Lovelace is. Very important. Look her up.
Okay,
I'll have to.
All right. And my last thought is going to be hijacking one of Rick's thoughts from In the Mumble. Rick got a copy of Sovereign Individual. You should get a copy of Sovereign Individual and read it. Because if you haven't read this book Rick's holding up right now, you're clueless. I'm gonna hold on. Let me. Yeah, this book. Get this book, The Sovereign Individual: Mastering the Transition to the Information Age, and read it. This is the most accurate social economical breakdown of how technology affects society and the way that it organizes I have ever read. Read it. If you're in the cryptocurrency space, it is required reading.
Oh yeah, man. I flipped through it. Definitely looks like I was saying in the mumble, it's like fascinating. Like just there's like multiple chapters and each chapter's got like titles on paragraphs, and it's just like you can just tell just like skimming through it that this book covers a lot. So yeah, it's definitely something I've been trying to pick up for a while, and it's on my book here, like my shelf here of books I pick up. So yeah, Sovereign Individual, everybody.
All right. Any straggling thoughts from anybody?
Yes, I have two thoughts. I posted one. When you said it was, when Shinobi, you were like, yeah, this is my last thought, I was like, oh shit, he's gonna end the show and I'm gonna have to scream again. This I thought was interesting. Someone pointed out that it looks like someone's created a beta. Well, that actually looks like an issue or a group of issues on GitHub. Anyway, beta Lightning looks like it's on its way. They've created a spot for it, so that'll be cool. And I have one more thought, which is another Nopara tweet. Hopefully he's still in the chat box.
Da-na-na, da-na-na. Loading thought. Loading thought. Thought is loaded.
This reminds me of Harry Potter when the guy's like pulling the thoughts out of his brain and looking at them in the wand.
Yeah, that's kind of what the internet is in some ways. So you probably saw this last week because we retweeted it, but Nopara and his girlfriend are planning to do some privacy interviews that are going to be hopefully on the Block Digest. So as far as I know, we're not sure when those are going to be ready, but when they're ready, hopefully we'll have them up on the channel. So
that's awesome. Good deal.
Even if they don't wind up on the channel, we will be showing them anyway. But
yeah,
we hope they do. So I guess on that note, stay away from Daddy Jihan Warburg, guys. Central banking is bad news bears. See you next time.
Later,
responsibility.
Yes.
Yes.